What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I got some updates for you today. I mean, look, it looks like we're getting to the point where we're getting so close to training camp and when things are supposed to really start opening. And every day there's a flood of new data about how terrible the coronavirus is and how bad it's spreading and so on and so forth. So there's updates every day, and I got some for you. There are obviously NFL specific stuff, but real quick, there is one thing that I want to mention that's not NFL related, but it is Corona related and sports related. So it looks like Buster Posey, obviously, I mentioned in a previous video, I'm not big on other sports, but I do know the name, and I know he's a pretty big sports figure in baseball. And anyway, point is Buster Posey apparently is opting out of the 2020 season over COVID-19 concerns after he adopted twin girls. I don't know why the twin girls part is all that relevant. Maybe he just wants to make sure he's around for his daughter's lives, which makes sense. But anyway, just real quick, San Francisco Giants star Buster Posey announced Friday that he is opting out of the 2020 MLB season amid the coronavirus pandemic. He told reporters on a Zoom call that earlier this week, twin girls that he and his wife are adopting were born prematurely and they will need to be in the NICU. He said after consulting with his family and doctors, he is choosing to sit out the 2020 season, becoming the most decorated player to make that decision. And look, man, it's the list is growing of players, but now it's getting, we saw the Big Ten now starting to shut down their programs. The Ivy League is shut down fall sports. So the dominoes are falling, and I've been telling you guys this for a while now. So he said after I read that. Former MVP, 6-time All-Star, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so point is, Buster Posey is sitting out. That is the next domino to fall in this whole thing. And yeah, so, what else, need be said about it, right? It's just yet another data point to prove what I've been saying this whole time. But let's get into the more NFL related stuff. So this is that previous article was from Yahoo Sports. This one is as well from a Charles Robinson. The NFL and players are on a collision course over safety and money. They have weeks to avert disaster. An NFL source was breaking down the league's proposal to draw back player salaries as much as 35% to help manage revenue losses in 2020. Framing it as an ask that was just the tip of the iceberg. The source said it foreshadowed a coming fight that will put the NFL and Players Union into deeply dug trenches and possibly endanger the start of the season in September. Of course. Now, hold on. Let's pause for a half a second, because stuff like this will get people to say some things like Dudley Do-Wrong had said about how, and I get that money runs everything, and that is one of the big root problems with this whole scenario, because the people in power are allowing their greed to supersede what is necessary for the health and safety of people. But that's not, and honestly, while that is the root problem overall, it's not the initial cause of it, right? Because the NFL and the owners would be greedy either way, but if there wasn't the coronavirus pandemic, then none of these solutions to solve their revenue losses would even be talked about, right? So it's not these discussions that are going to be these battles over money and safety. Well, the safety is part of it, right? So it's not just the money, but these battles are not, it's hard to say what I'm trying to say here, but these battles are not they're the symptoms, right? Of the root cause. So the initial cause, the catalyst of all this, was the pandemic that created all of these issues to begin with, that facilitated the necessity to have a conversation about how to fix them. And then the greed came into play, because instead of doing the logical and safe solution of just shutting down, then the greed kicks in, which then causes the NFL and the owners to start coming up with solutions on how they can save their money as opposed to make sure that the players are safe, etc., etc. Finally, the source spelled out the revenue loss and lack of a player give back in one sentence. It's a major problem that isn't going away, the source told Yahoo Sports on Thursday. One way or the other, it's going to have to be bargained out between the league and the union if this is going to work. A major problem that isn't going away. Yeah, so anyway, like I said, I mean, at the end of the day, the season, one way or the other, is going to be canceled. I mean, it's almost, from my perspective, I mean, I obviously could be wrong. They could be just so despicable that they insist on playing the entire season out. But even if they are that despicable, I just don't see how it's possible, because they're going to lose, people, right? And not necessarily just, death, right? That's the most extreme thing. But there are going to be players that opt out. They've already been talking about, the situation there, and clauses to put into contracts and stuff like that. There's going to be players that get sick. They might not die, but they'll have to go to quarantine for at least a couple weeks, which disrupts all kinds of stuff. And then there will be people that will ultimately end up dying, coaches, players, because depending on how far they push this, I mean, it's really up to them. On how much risk they want to take. This is the NFL behind the scenes right now, as the league puts forth ancillary and somewhat nonsensical protocols like not being able to do a post-game jersey swap. There are bigger fish to fry in the next few weeks, absolutely. And the space to get this work done is shrinking to the point that it's alarming players. So much so that when the NFL Players Association had an open call with membership last week, a litany of players expressed serious misgivings about the reliability of safety protocols, not to mention the swath of unanswered questions. Indianapolis Colts quarterback Philip Rivers asked what would happen if an asymptomatic player tested positive before the Super Bowl. Houston Texans defensive end J.J. Watt questioned whether the NFL had all the right protocols lined up for the opening of training camp. Suddenly, a picture emerged. With camp reporting just weeks away and COVID-19 anxiety as real as ever, NFL players appeared to be extremely uncertain about whether they were the ones taking the majority of the risk in this endeavor. And they absolutely are. Well, the fans, and honestly, I would say the fans probably would be taking the most risk, because that would be the highest concentration of people, and also the highest concentration of people that would include, simultaneously include, the highest probability of individuals who have contracted the virus, right? So anyway, but certainly it's a risk that they don't need to be taking. Anyway, let's see. Naturally, their questions have centered on whether the NFL was ready to protect them. An agent who listened on the NFLPA call with one of his players said he heard a lot of anxiety. Considering the work left to be done, and with multiple team officials who spoke to Yahoo Sports describing the upcoming training camps with some type of verbiage describing a litany of unknowns, a lot of anxiety makes sense. Not to mention a lot of potential for things to go sideways. Consider the considerable work left on the table before camps are slated to open on July 28th. Bargains must be struck with NFL and NFLPA. The money, whether it's the pay of players in 2020 or the impact of future salary caps, has to be bargained out. The COVID-19 testing regimens have to be bargained out. By the way, let's just mention real quick that if the NFL does end up getting completely shut down this season, as well as college sports and everything, right? Like there's a pretty big difference between the lockouts that we've had in previous years than this, right? Because this actually could have far more longer lasting reverberating effects into the future than the lockout did, right? Because for example, like, sure, okay, the lockouts, forced, a contracted season, and, preparation time was missed, but in the previous lockouts, there weren't, it didn't affect college sports, right? At the very least, right? So even if they ended up, playing some games, or even if they didn't play, a season at all, it still wouldn't have affected college sports, for example. This is one of the biggest ways in which I think that it could reverberate into the future, right? Because all college sports are shutting down, right? So there was some tweet or whatever by, I can't even remember his name off the top of my head. He's a Matt Infante, I think it was, that moron. And he was saying something about how like there's 2021 mock drafts and stuff coming out, and there's a couple prospects he's really looking at. But what if they're not eligible because they're behind in their academics and their, whatever, because of the fact that their school gets shut down? Like, I mean, there's a possibility there won't be a draft next year, like, at all. Not just because it might need to be held virtually because the pandemic is still going on, but also because, I mean, none of these players are going to be playing football this year, likely. The entire college season is likely to get shut down as well. So how does that affect the draft, right? We're already in a position, I mean, this past draft, scouts and evaluators were already behind because they couldn't do lots of in-person stuff, etc., physicals, they couldn't do pro days, all this stuff, right? So they're already behind. But what if then the entire college season misses a year? Scouting and evaluation is going to be way behind. Players are not going to be eligible for an additional year. That'll get pushed back, right? So there's all kinds of complications that could, cause serious issues for the NFL as a whole going forward. Anyway, the protocols about how camps can be run on a daily basis have to be bargained out. The safety protocols beyond testing have to be bargained out. Equipment changes such as mandatory face shields have to be bargained out. And maybe above all else, players have to be convinced that the NFL has done everything possible to guarantee their safety. That's a lot to accomplish in less than 3 weeks, and it might be impossible. It might mean a late start for training camp. It might mean no preseason games, and it might lead to a delay in the regular season, something the NFL absolutely does not want, evidenced by an offseason that ran largely on time, albeit in a different form than the past years. But for 2020 to start on time, all of the aforementioned questions have to be resolved, among others, and after they are, the NFL has to have a clear plan to keep players in the fold once an outbreak of coronavirus happens, which could have a chilling effect that causes players to pull out from the season en masse. Planning to get the season underway is only half of the effort. Keeping the season underway looms just as large, and there may not be a way to convince players that adequate measures exist for that until an outbreak happens. Which outbreaks undoubtedly will happen, and it's impossible. They can't do it. They just flat out can't do it. There's no safe way to do this. The only thing that's keeping them on this course is their greed. Financial storm is going to hit NFL hard. There are two significant fronts of attack that the NFL and NFLPA are trying to remedy now. The first is getting everything in place to have an actual season. The second is how to deal with the unavoidable financial meteor that is heading for the NFL. The one that players believe they shouldn't have to deal with because they're taking the lion's share of infection risks by going out and slamming into each other in the name of having a season and keeping the television revenues safe and sound is money. Okay, so pause right there though. Again, the NFL is a multinational over trillion dollar, guaranteed, has to be, but if not, at least in the hundreds of billions, worth in the hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. Every single owner is a billionaire. I guarantee, 100% guarantee, that if they just shut down the season, they could eat the losses and pay all their fucking players and staff and personnel and so on and so forth their year's full salary and still not even realize that they lost any money. I mean, of course they realize it because they're greedy scumbags and they care about every fucking penny, hence why they're doing this. And in fact, they want to make sure that they siphon every fucking penny that they possibly can from us to them, even during a pandemic. But look, man, the players shouldn't have to deal with this. The NFL should just shut down, and they can deal with it, man. They could honestly probably shut down for the next 5-10 years and still not even fucking eat into the profits that they've made because they have so much, right? I mean, the profits that they made over the past several decades, right? They'll still be billionaires. They could sit for the next 5 years and still be billionaires at the end of it. The player... Because a billionaire has more money than, I don't know, multiple generations of their family would be able to ever spend in their lifetimes. So it's ridiculous. The players and union have been sending a unified message. They should be paid every single cent owed to them with no 35% discount, and they should get that money with no preseason games and with teams doling out massive sums of money for testing and safety while simultaneously selling significantly fewer tickets. honestly, they should also be paid hazard pay, you know, for putting their lives out there in the middle of a fucking pandemic to risk entertainment for the profits of these people. Then they should also be paid additional money, right? Anyway, but I mean, it just shouldn't happen anyway. That's setting up a financial face-off that is bound to rear its head again before September. By suggesting a 35% reduction in salaries to help offset operating costs, the NFL has sent a clear message from the franchise owners. If we're going to lose revenue, players should lose some salary. We should be equal partners in the loss. No, that's gross. And that's not even close, bro. You could maybe claim that if the revenues and the profits were equally distributed. But the wealth disparity, yes, a lot of, not all of them, the majority of players in the NFL do not have those, you know, multi-million-dollar fucking contracts, okay? Because there's practice squad players, 10-person practice squad players on every team that don't make shit, and then the back half of rosters don't make shit, comparatively. And certainly even Patrick Mahomes, okay, who just got a $500 million deal for the next 10 years. So he's going to have to live out that entire, well, technically it's 12 years because he still has 2 more years on his rookie contract, but he's going to have to make it through that entire 10-year contract, which is 12 years in actual time, before he's going to see that $500 million. Do you know how much money the NFL and the owners will make in that 10-year time? They will become billionaires multiple times over. Okay? So while you might even have, you know, the most highly paid players in the NFL making hundreds of millions of dollars potentially at the best, the owners and the NFL rake in probably 1,000 times that easy. Like, it's absurd. It's not a fair playing field, and they should, and you look at the revenue side, but it's the risk side is not fair either. The owners are not down on the field smashing into people, right? The GMs even aren't. The fucking front office aren't. The coaches aren't. It's only the players. But the coaches also do obviously have a lot of risk. But after that, it's the players, the coaches, the fans, the referees, the camera crews, support staffs. Those are going to be the people that are going to be on the front lines risking their lives. The front office people, they can stay isolated in their little cubicles in their offices. The ownership, they can just stay the fuck home in their mansions, right? So it's not an even playing field at all. But it's absolutely despicable, and it just goes to show you the depth of their greed when they try and frame it as if, oh, well, we need to be partners in this thing, and if we're going to take losses, you guys should take losses. No, you're fucks. You guys should eat everything. In fact, you should cancel the season, lose all of your revenue from this year, but still pay all of your players, coaches, support staff, etc., and, well, I guess if there's no season, there's no point for the hazard pay. But if you're going to force them to have a season, you 100% should be increasing their pay, not decreasing it in multiple ways. Like just flat out cutting guys, asking them to take reduced salaries, and then proposing to hold 35% of their salaries in escrow, have them sign waivers. No, it's just gross. One league source familiar with some of the revenue loss models spelled out why team owners feel this way, telling Yahoo Sports on Thursday that some projections suggest a revenue hit so costly that the 2021 salary cap may have to reduce by as much as $40 million per team to reflect the 2020 dip. Okay, eat it, you fucking selfish, greedy bastards. You can do it. They can fucking eat that fucking money and not blink. How much do you think 40 million... They say 40 million per team. Okay, so if you have an owner who's a billionaire, $40 million is something that he probably wipes his ass with. Okay, so every one of those team owners can automatically, right now, here today, say, if they so chose, we are going to offset that, and that problem is null and void. It's not a problem at all, right? The NFL and the owners have the power and the resources to make sure that all of these problems that are here and exist just go away, right? They can ensure that the only ramification is that some of the pocket change that comes from the vaults of massive wealth that they have is the only ramification. But no, of course not. More likely than not, the NFL and the union would smooth it out by taking away smaller increments of money from future caps. The source said it would be made up in the aggregate of 5 or 6 or 10 salary caps than all at once. But either way, again, that's just yet another way that they would then take money from the players, right? Because instead of just covering that cap discrepancy out of their own money, they would allow it to be reduced, so then there would be less money to give to the players. So every solution that they have, every single solution that the NFL or the owners have is take money from the players and the fans, etc., siphon as much money from them as we possibly can to recoup our losses and make sure that they are also taking all of the risk. All of the risk. We want none of it. Not only are we going to make sure that we siphon the money to recoup our losses from them, but then we're going to make them, the players and the fans, everybody sign waivers. So when inevitably there are outbreaks and then subsequently people die, we cannot be held responsible either financially or criminally, which they should be. A high-ranking AFC team source confirmed this same likelihood, that a hit would be absorbed but also spread out. But the league source added that it could be remedied if players were willing to give back some salaries now to help teams deal with costs that are going to rise and revenues that are going to shrink. Again, bro, like, they present it as if that's like the only option. Man, hey, look, guys, if we're gonna avert this disaster, the only option is you guys have to sacrifice. We're massively wealthy and have all the resources in the world, etc., etc., but no, we can't sacrifice anything. That would not work. That's just a disaster. We have to protect ourselves in absolutely every way possible, right? From risk of harm from this thing, as well as from risk of financial loss. But no, you guys take all the sacrifice. God, it pisses me off how gross it is. The union has made its feelings on a lump sum salary giveback clear. It's not going to happen, as in never. Instead, it will be future players who will lose out on some capital as future salary caps rise less aggressively than originally planned, which takes us back to the start of the dwindling days that lie ahead, and the reality that for this to work, every fundamental building block has yet to be put into place. Let's just note, for clarity, those things that I was saying I find disgusting, those ideologies, were not the writer. He was quoting people, but those were people like, high people from, sports franchise, the franchises or the NFL. Things that aren't going to be resolved by issuing decrees about jersey exchanges. In the larger picture, that's just a minuscule detail. And unless the league and the union can get on the same page in quick fashion, none of the minuscule stuff will matter, because there won't be an NFL season to implement in the first place. Absolutely true. But I've been telling you guys this. And, well, I still get ignored by most people. So, okay, whatever. People can choose to believe what they want. I'm constantly proven right in my evaluations. I'm not always right, to be fair. I am often wrong, in fact. But I am generally correct in my at the very least, my broad scale and generalized predictions. I'm not the greatest at timing, and I'm not the greatest at specifically detailing things always. Sometimes I am, not always. But I'm pretty generally good in my predictions. Anyway, let's continue adding to this, because this actually gets a little bit more specific when it comes to Dolphins players who are expressing concern. So there's this article from Sports Illustrated. Alan Pupar is also a Dolphins writer in specific, but for Sports Illustrated, and he wrote this. Let's see. Dolphins players expressing safety concerns. We're now less than 3 weeks away until the start of training camp around the NFL, but there remain an awful lot of unanswered questions as to how best to protect the players in the midst of a global coronavirus pandemic. And some Miami Dolphins players have taken to social media to voice their concerns about playing football under the current circumstances. Interestingly, the comments are coming from the defensive backfield. I saw comments somewhere, I don't remember exactly where it was, but Vince Beagle had made some comments about it too, and he's not, he's not convinced that, and he's obviously a linebacker, but he's obviously not convinced that things are set and good to go right now. Anyway, the first comment to appear this week was former cornerback Byron Jones, the free agent acquisition from the Dallas Cowboys, who commented on new NFLPA President J.C. Tretter's opinion column entitled Prioritizing Player Safety in a Pandemic. So, he made a comment, and then Byron Jones said, "We want to play football. Work with us, NFL, to make it happen safely, please." I mean, that was a really, mundane and an easy way of saying it, but okay. Jones's former Dallas Cowboys teammate Kavon Frazier, who signed with the Dolphins as a free agent after the draft, chimed in later. 2 weeks left before a camp date that was given, and still no progress on making it safe for the players. NFL, we want to play, but safety first. That's a little bit more direct and aggressive. Also posting similar tweets this week were Dolphins cornerbacks Nick Needham and Ryan Lewis. Like his teammates, Lewis made a direct plea to the league. "Dear NFL, please address the health and safety concerns so we can play football this year. I know everybody wants to see football this year, but we need the NFL to step up and create a safe work environment for us." So, I love that they're all speaking up. And I get that they want to be paid, and that's obviously one of their biggest concerns. And honestly, that's probably one of the biggest reasons why they want to play football, because they don't feel like they're going to get paid if there's no season, right? If the season has to get shut down entirely, I guarantee you these players are like, we're on the inside feeling like they're just not going to get paychecks. So I guarantee that is a massive driving force. But there's not going to be such a thing as playing safely. It's not going to happen. It's just not. And watch. Hear me now, quote me later. This is one thing that I will say definitively. There is not any way possible to safely play a season this year. There have been multiple reports of what kind of changes will take place in training camp this summer, though no formal announcements have been made. Among the changes, the one that stands out is the reduction of the preseason from 4 to 2 games, though the NFLPA is said to be looking to eliminate the 2020 preseason altogether. In addition, there has been talk of training camp rosters being cut from 90 to 80 or even 75 players, and it appears fans will not be allowed to attend any practices with the exception of 2 in-stadium events if a set of protocols can be followed, including no contact with players. A report earlier this week indicated that the NFL wants to forbid any post-game interaction, including the popular jersey exchanges. Both teams will have to travel to the stadium on game day by bus, which is a terrible idea, and media will not be allowed in the locker room for post-game interviews. Another game day protocol will mandate the wearing of face masks on the sidelines for everyone other than players and coaches, which is, again, just stupid. It makes absolutely no fucking sense. Anyway, so look, and I mean, this is going to continue to spread. Players are going to get more and more worried about it because the NFL and the owners aren't going to do shit about it except for superficial lip service bullshit. And then, look, man, the season's going to get canceled. It's not going to happen. One way or another, whether they get enough pressure ahead of time to, finally, say, okay, fine, we're not going to be greedy and we're just going to shut down, which I actually find less likely, or they're going to push the issue and then there's going to be massive outbreaks in which there will be fatalities and then they will have to shut down. Anyway, to end this though, because this went on for about 30 minutes of me, going on rants and tangents about how disgusting this is, because it is, and it is important to talk about, but here's how I'll end it. So there's a tweet from Barry Jackson, and he notes that the Jacksonville Jaguars announced that they will play at about 25% capacity this season. Again, still terrible idea, but it's another team moving in the right direction, okay? And showing a trend now, right? So, again, Ivy League, the first major domino a few days ago was the Ivy League. Then the Big Ten. We've had a slew of players from all sports who are deciding to opt out, etc., right? So this is just another data point and another step in that direction that ultimately will lead to the entire thing shutting down, from my perspective. No determination or announcement yet from Dolphins on Hard Rock Stadium. So 25% is still a disaster, but it's 75% less of a disaster than it would be if they were trying to pack the entire stadium. The Dolphins, however, are still on a course of just packing the fucking stadium. So they are insisting on being one of the more despicable teams to this point. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here. I hope you guys appreciate my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comments section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.